Hi everybody, it's Franny, and we're still working away on our Carrera 3.2 engine rebuild project here. There's one last thing I want to do on the engine here, and that is take a look at this clutch. A bunch of you commented early on in the process and said, well, have you looked at the clutch? And I'm like, well, it looks pretty good. You can't tell anything unless you take it off the car. And I was kind of a little worried about this, but I did some research and kind of looked into it, looked through the service manual. It's not that big of a deal to get off. So today what I'm going to do is pull this clutch off, inspect it, and see if we need to pull the flywheel off, see how that surface looks. I think this clutch has been replaced fairly recently, but you never know, right? Also, there's the throwout bearing here. But if we're gonna do clutch work, I'm gonna go ahead and either replace that or rebuild it, one of the two. So that's the first half of what we're doing today. In addition, I wanna get to that engine bay. It's a mess in there, and this engine is far too pretty and far too clean to go into a dirty engine bay. All right, well, let's get this clutch off and see what we're in for. But before we pull everything off, you have to be certain that you can put it back on again, and it's super duper important that you get that pressure plate in the back aligned properly. Now there's a special tool for this that comes with any clutch kit, but if you're just doing an inspection, you make sure you have this tool first. Now this one feels like it's a little too long to get in there, but you can actually pop the end off of this. There we go. And that makes it a lot easier, and we kind of just push this guy in here until it seats, and that holds everything in place with the pressure plate. We'll need that more for putting it on. We don't really so much need it for taking it off. But just make sure you've got one of these tools available before you start. Another handy dandy thing you'll probably need is a flywheel lock. And once again, that's going to be important for putting it on, not so much for taking it off. Although maybe if these bolts are really, really tight, they shouldn't be too tight. You may need to lock down the flywheel before you can go any further. So that's just something to think about. You might need one of these. You can also take like a metal bracket or something and bolt it to one of these bolts, and then as you work around, and then just kind of take it off and move it if you need to. That's another way to go. And finally, I'm going to be wearing my safety glasses on this. Clutches are under a lot of pressure, and they're pushing pretty hard on that pressure plate. In fact, we're going to be taking off our bolts just a little bit at a time all the way around, because we don't want to torque or tweak this thing at all, especially if it's in great shape and we want to put it back on. Our clutch is held on by 9 6mm cap bolts. Not too bad. All right, there we go. Well, that's a good start. We're one turn out on each of these. Just continue round and round about a half a turn at a time until all the bolts are loose. All right, and here's our last one at the top. Now in these cars, it's a little strange, but the gear ring is actually not part of the flywheel. It's actually bolted on. So the next step is to just pull the gear ring out, because it's really what's holding the clutch on. Just really carefully pry it loose. Missed a bolt. There we go. There it goes. Okay, so this is our gear ring. You want to inspect this pretty carefully. Make sure that the starter hasn't been chewing on it anywhere, and there aren't any, of course, broken teeth or anything on it, and any sharp edges on it anywhere as well. And I am seeing some little edges here. So I don't know if this will come through, but there's some raised bits right here. So I think I'm going to take those down with a file before I put this back on. With our gear ring off, we should be able to remove the clutch at this point. There it goes. There we go. There it goes. All right, there we go. This is the inside of our clutch, and taking a look at it, I don't know. Now it's got a little bit of rust on it. That's to be expected. We've power washed this thing, got it pretty wet, and it hasn't run in a while. What you're looking for on your pressure plate is to make sure that there's still enough material here and it's good and thick. You certainly do not want any of these rivets showing through. And this one looks kind of worn. I need to check it against the spec to see if it's okay, but I don't know. It doesn't look like there's a huge amount of meat left on this thing. Our next step is going to be to clean all of this up as best we can. Now, something else about these clutches, and also it can apply to brakes as well. Be careful with this stuff. A lot of these things have asbestos in them, so don't use compressed air to just sort of and blow it all out, because it's going to push those fibers into the air and then you'll breathe them, and that's very, very bad. So I'm going to use a solvent to get at this, probably brake cleaner, and we'll go ahead and clean this up a bit and take a look at this surface on the flywheel. If we don't have to resurface the flywheel, that would be a good thing. The back of the flywheel actually looks pretty good. I mean, that looks pretty good from now. I want to take a quick little break to do a little review of these two products. Now, they're both made by the same company. They're both called Brake Clean, but they're just slightly different. This one here is a Pro Series, and it's a 50-state version, and this is sort of their original. Now, I'm not a big fan of this, actually, to be honest. It tends to chew up my gloves. It seems to evaporate way too fast and doesn't clean nearly as well as this does. And it's kind of stinky, too. So if you're at the auto parts store and you have a choice between the two of these, I would pick this one over this one. It's just my opinion on that, but not a big fan. I've just been cleaning away on this. I didn't want to bore you with all of that. I've gotten to the point where I think the flywheel's looking pretty good. We do have a few areas that look like, I don't know, it looks like they could be cleaned a little bit. Maybe there's a slight bit of burning, but not too bad. I'm just going to sand them down a little bit and get any of this off of it. But the flywheel itself looks awesome. And I can see where it's been machined before. I can kind of see the swirl marks from the machining tool. And there's absolutely no ridge at all. I don't think there's any wear to the flywheel. So I think we're good with the flywheel. I just want to kind of dress it up a little bit. Let me continue with that. Well, I'm really glad we pulled the clutch and inspected it. So some good news and some bad news. The flywheel looks awesome. That's great. But I think we're going to go ahead and do a full clutch kit replacement on this, which will be the pressure plate, the clutch housing, the throwout bearing, and then also this little pilot bearing in here that feels not so great as well. So all right, well, it's good to know. We'll make up a parts list, get the parts ordered, and we'll go ahead and get that installed a little bit later. With all the work on the engine, one thing I wanted to mention were the folks that did the powder coating and the ceramic coating. I'll put their information up here, but it's Pristine Powder Coating, and they're in Sheridan, Colorado on Union Street. They were awesome. They did a great job on this stuff. I mean, honestly, all these bits look brand new. They did a beautiful job on it. They also did some work for us on the Ferrari. They did the exhaust on the Ferrari as well. I'm really happy with the quality of their work. And if you need to get some powder coating done or some ceramic coating done, go ahead and give them a call and check them out. And if you're out of town, I know that they'll also accept shipments as well. So if you've got anything that needs to get done, go ahead and give them a call. While we're waiting for our new clutch parts, let's go ahead and get back to the car itself and get that engine bay cleaned. Our engine bay is awfully dirty, but I want to start by covering up some of our wires. I don't want to get any liquids or anything or any cleaners inside the actual connections. So I have some plastic bags I'm going to put on them and tape them around there. And then we're just going to kind of get to cleaning. all I'm using here is some simple green in an Adams repurposed bottle and a stiff plastic brush. The other side of the car is quite a bit worse, and that's because that's where the oil filter is, and all those years of oil changes have had oil roll up into the front corner there, so it's quite a mess. Well, here's how it turned out. Not exactly perfect, but I think quite a bit better. Well, that was a ton of work, but it turned out great. The engine bay is nice and clean. It looks clean. I'm not going to become a chocolate Smurf every time I work on the car. So a lot of people ask me, how do you stay so clean working on the car? Well, you kind of start with a clean car. That's the only trick to it. So I wanted to get in here, we got access, get in here, clean all this area out really, really well, and we won't have any of the schmutz here, and we're not gonna get it all over us next time we're working on the car. Now, the next thing I'd like to do, since we're in here, is to go ahead and replace the rubber gasket that goes all the way around. So this is a sealing surface for the engine when it's up, and it's very important on these air-cooled cars that the top of the engine be completely insulated from the bottom. So that's what these gaskets are for. Now the old one, like this one, is just hard and it's all kind of wobbly looking, and this one even has pieces that are broken out of it. So it's definitely time for a replacement. Now, one thing to look at with this is that it's maybe a little hard to see, but it's not symmetric. So it either goes in this way or goes in this way. And I looked at the original, which I haven't pulled completely out yet. The littler bead goes on the top and the bigger bead goes on the bottom. So when it's in, it's going to sort of face downward a little bit. As it's in straight, it's going to just sort of hang down a little bit. Somebody has crimped this a little bit, this channel, so I'm going to open up the crimps a little bit. So the little crimps I'm talking about are down here, where I think they were just sort of put in just probably to pinch it so it wouldn't move. So she has a big screwdriver here and just pull them out a little bit, just so it's a lot easier to get this guy in. Just open that up a little bit. I'm going to add a bit of silicone grease to this. Okay. And now from the right side here, with the little bead up and the big bead down, we'll go ahead and slide it in. I'm leaving a little extra room here on the right side just because we have to do the one that goes all the way around the car there. And I just don't want this piece colliding. And when we get the other one in, we'll go ahead and cinch them together. Well, little change of plans. That big long piece, because of these corners, it's very difficult to get through the channel. So I think what I'm going to do, I think I can just sort of hook it up and then push it in on the bottom all the way around. We'll give that a try. We have to kind of center it first, but I think it's going to be easier this way. So there's the center. Little bead to the top. This would be the center here, right about there. Let's push that guy in and work this in all the way around. Yeah, I think this is going to be a lot easier. I'm trying to pull it through. So that's how it all ended up. Obviously it's a bit long, so we'll have to trim it. No problem, but you can kind of see what it looks like there underneath, all the way around. And here, the little problem area and the corner. Oh, looks like I have a little bit sticking out there. I'll have to push that one back in. And then up top, it looks like this. all the way around. And then this corner up here was a bit difficult as well. I think I could probably push that in a little more. Well, with our engine bay looking much better than it did, we're turning back to the clutch. Now, I went ahead and ordered a full clutch kit for the car, and that includes the pressure plate, the clutch disc, a new throwout bearing, and little bits for that, and that little alignment tool I was talking about, which is pretty sweet. In addition to that, there's also a pilot bearing here in the center of the flywheel, and that's the bearing, of course, that holds the prop shaft, actually, from the transmission. So I ordered a new one of those as well. They're not particularly expensive, and it's a little needle bearing in there, and the one that's on the car now just doesn't feel so great. In order, what we're going to be doing is replacing this pilot bearing first. That'll be the first thing we do. Next, we need to assemble the actual throwout bearing onto the pressure plate here. It's got a bunch of little spacers and rings and stuff. They have to go in the right order and get that all sorted. And then we can turn to installing the actual clutch. And it's really not that difficult. We just use our alignment tool. We make sure that our clutch disc is in the right place, and then just one turn around all the way at the end, and then we just torque it down. So it's only 18 foot-pounds, so it's not particularly tight either. Since you're still with us at this point in the video, a quick little shameless plug for the channel. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the little subscribe button down there and then hit the little bell next to it. That way you'll be notified every time we upload videos. We have a lot more going on with the 3.2 Carrera, and then we've got stuff to do on pretty much all the other cars in the garage, so you're not going to want to miss any of it. So thanks so much for that. We'll start by removing the old pilot bearing. It's just a 5mm hex. All right, it just sort of pulls out there. We can see some of the old, looks like this is probably just old grease, yeah. So we'll go ahead and clean that out. And what I read suggested a lithium-based grease for this little bearing that's in here. So we're gonna go ahead and pack it. You don't wanna just throw grease in there. You wanna really work it into each one of the little rollers in here. All right, we can refit this guy. Huh. There we go. I couldn't find a torque spec for these 3 bolts, so I'm going to go with 18 foot-pounds or 25 newton meters, which is the torque we're going to use to attach the clutch to the flywheel. I think that's probably going to be plenty for these small bolts. Oh no! No, 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 no! Well, we ran into a bit of a snag. I did something kind of stupid here. So our new bearing, our new pilot bearing here, fits inside this little flange on the flywheel, and I thought it was sitting down all the way, but it wasn't. It was actually a little bit proud, and it's a little hard to see, but you can see sort of a silvery mark there on this flange surface here, and it wasn't sitting all the way in. And as I was running the bolts in, I got down to where I thought they were set, and then they just continued to move a little bit more and a little bit more, and then finally, I snapped one off. Let me show you. So there it is. The top one there, right here, I snapped that guy off. So I'm not very happy about that whatsoever. So what we're gonna have to do is extract that bolt, what's left of it, I suppose. It's not the end of the world. I have a screw extraction kit, and you know, it isn't like bottomed out or in there very tight. It just broke because the flange wouldn't sit all the way. And then I'm gonna have to source 3 new cap bolts as well because I don't trust them. I probably have got the other ones close to shearing as well. Well, let's get this guy out first. Well, I've been working on this a bit and ran into fairly obvious problem. I can't get a drill in here. There's just not enough clearance. I'd have to take the engine off the stand, but I thought I would try something a little bit different. I've got my Dremel here, and see that teeny weeny itty bitty little grinder on the end of that thing? So it's super duper teeny, and what I did was just to go back and forth on this thing and actually make myself a slot so that it can actually fit a flat screwdriver. So I went back and forth and back and forth. Now I also have another super cool tool, and if you've ever seen one of these, you'll know that this is like the most awesome screwdriver you've ever seen. It's called a skew driver because it's basically, it's not quite 90 degrees, but it's close. So it's got a set of bevel gears up there in the top, so we can turn it down here and the screwdriver turns on the end. This thing is super helpful for getting into tight spaces. So let's go ahead and use our screwdriver and get that stupid screw out. Push this guy against here. There we go, it's turning. There we go. It's coming out. All right. Look at that. Okay. And we got it. There it is, with its little slot in there. I find that this is not a bad way at all to get out screws like this, especially if you've got ever so bit of it proud, and it did. It had maybe one thread at the most, so like a millimeter proud, and I was able to just work a slot in there without damaging the surface at all of the flywheel itself. So we're perfectly good here. Now with all of this fuss down here, I'm gonna have to clean all this back out again, but that's not a big deal, no problem there. And that now leaves our bearing, which still didn't go in all the way. So I think I'm gonna have to take some sandpaper and sand this guy down just enough to where it fits in perfectly, because it wasn't seating. This surface wouldn't seat. And I think that's what caused the problem, was it was going in just ever so slightly cockeyed, which kind of barely bent the screw and screwed up the threads. You know, sometimes these things happen. You break a screw. I thought I was gonna come out here, show you guys it was gonna be really fast actually. Oh, I have to just put 3 bolts, put that guy on, and then 9 bolts, clutches on, boom, we're done. And that was gonna be the end of it. But, you know, these things just happen sometimes in the garage, and it was my mistake. I was being stupid. I should have made sure that this piece, you know, sat in there perfectly before I even attempted. I thought it would just sort of wiggle a little bit and go kunk and lock right in. It never did. And I put too much stress on those bolts and they snapped. So my bad, certainly. The trick in these situations is to kind of just try to be as calm as possible. Or if you're gonna get upset, go ahead and get upset, but just walk away from the project. You don't want to get upset at the machine and throw or bang or something like, I mean, anything like that. It's just really, really bad. So then just kind of calm yourself down for a little bit. When you're happy again, then go ahead and get back to it. So, you see Heidi there.
Hi.
She's gonna go save the day. She's my hero for today. She's gonna go down to the hardware store and get me some more of those cap bolts. Hopefully they'll have them, but she's gonna save the day. So thank you so much, Heidi. I've worked the edge down a bit with my Dremel and sort of smoothed it down a bit. Looks pretty good. Let's see how we fit. There we go. Boom. Yeah, you can feel it. It's now seated all the way. There's no lip, and it'll spin around easily. It's not getting caught on anything. Any rate, if you're putting in one of these, this is a Roush & Spiegel bearing, pilot bearing on your 3.2 Carrera. If you're doing this exact job, double check the fit of this guy, because this one was too big. Well, Heidi is back with our new bolts, and she did one up on the originals. The originals are grade 8.8, and this one is a grade 12.9. So I was gonna beat myself up on the torque values here. Now for the 8.8, these are M6 bolts, it should be 11.8 would be the highest in foot-pounds you'd go for one of these guys. So I was definitely over what I should have been, so that was bad on me. For these 12.9 grade bolts, we can go up to almost 20 foot-pounds. So that's 19.9 is what we can go up to. I think I'm going to split the difference a little bit and torque them to 15 foot-pounds just to be on the safe side. So now we can just place our bearing here on the shoulder and see how it spins easily now. That's great. Throw our bolt in. You know, honestly, as much of a nightmare as that was, I'm much happier with these bolts in there. They're just much stronger. I can get them a little bit tighter. I don't have to worry about them and feel really good about that. So yay! Before we start the installation of the throwout bearing, I wanted to show you the difference between the old one and the new one. So the brand new one is super smooth and absolutely quiet. It's totally silent. It's a new bearing. But that's the way they should be when they're new. It comes pre-greased, it's all ready to be installed, so we don't have to fuss with any of that. Now this is the old one that's on the old pressure plate here, and listen to this. You hear that? Now, I suppose you could service that possibly if it's not too far gone, but it feels the way it's sort of wobbling and yeah, that sort of grinding noise, it sounds super, super bad. In addition to the actual bearing itself, we've got 4 rings we have to install. The first one is a spacer that goes just right over the little snout here, simple enough. The next one is a little expandy ring guy here. That needs to go on as well. And I believe it goes on like that. Then our bearing goes into the housing here. Then we turn it upside down. Oh boy, this thing's heavy. Okay. And then we have a thick ring here that has a little shoulder in it. You can kind of see the shoulder right there. That's for our 4th one, which is sort of a catch ring here. And that's going to sit in that slot. So that goes over the top here. All right. And then our little catch ring goes over the top. There we go. And snaps into place. And there we go. That's pretty much it. It's sort of loose in there a little bit. It kind of can wobble around a little bit. This one's a little tighter, but it can also wobble around a bit, so I think we're fine there. It's kind of not my day today. All right, I didn't break anything this time, which that's a good thing, but this just felt really loose in there and the old one didn't. So there were no real instructions exactly how these pieces go in. So we've got our spacer and I had this on wrong. I had it on like that. It really needs to go on like that. And that's important. Here's the original that I just took off and that's how I figured that out. All right, let's go ahead and put it back on. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Now, how does that feel? See, that's a lot better. It's not sliding around on the top there. Well, that's our clutch pressure plate all set to go. Before we install our pressure plate and clutch disc, let's go ahead and clean this surface one last time. Use a little bit of brake cleaner and just wipe it down. Just want to make sure there isn't any errant grease or any debris in there at all. Looking on our clutch disc here, there's a little bit of text here that says gearbox side. So this part points towards the gearbox and this part towards the engine. So we just place this guy on here, but of course it can be anywhere. That's what our tool is for. So we'll push our tool in here and get it centered and push our tool all the way in. There we go. Okay, that centers that well. Next, we'll grab our actual clutch pressure plate here. We're going to do the same thing and wipe it down, a little bit of brake cleaner. And see, it is a little dirty. Okay, there we go. Nice and clean. There we go. Okay, let's see, I think it goes, there we go, somewhat like that. Now, before you go putting your bolts in, we forgot something, didn't we? One last thing. That's this guy. You really don't want to forget it. And if you look at it, it kind of looks like the gear rail is already on there because you can see it in the back. That's not the gear rail, this is. So let's make sure we refit this as well. Oh, we got this backwards. And I got it backwards. But it can't go on both ways. The recessed part goes towards the engine and the flat goes towards the transmission. Whoa, don't let your clutch fall out. All right, that's better. Line that up. There we go. That looks a lot better. Now we just need to get our first hole. There it is. Okay, And just place the rest of our bolts here. We're just continuing around putting our bolts in. With all 9 of our cap bolts seated, we just kind of do the same thing we did when we took it off. We're just going to go 1 turn on each one and just keep going around and around and around until it's completely seated. Okay, that's it. They're all seated. I'm setting my torque wrench to 25 Newton meters or 18 foot-pounds. And we'll just go around and torque them all down. Okay, and that's it. All 9 of our cap bolts torqued down. And as it was before, our throw-up bearing is a little bit looser now. That's fine. It should be able to sort of float around a little on there. And we just pull our tool out because now our pressure plate is holding our clutch disc up against the flywheel. And well, that's that. That's our clutch and pilot bearing back in. So it was a very good thing that we pulled this thing out and took a look at it. I think the old one was kind of shot. Certainly the pilot bearing and the throw-up bearing was not good. So I feel pretty good with this new unit. I think we're great. In addition to that, we got our engine bay cleaned and it looks awesome as well. So where do we go from here? Great question. We went ahead and took the transmission down to a place called Store's Garage, and they are currently working on the transmission. They're going to pull it apart and take a look at it and replace anything and everything that needs to be replaced in there. I believe the transmission isn't too awfully bad, but since we're here at this point, and that was the reason we took it out in the first place, go ahead and have them do a once-over on it. Interesting little tidbit though, while I was down there, this is a shop that's been in business since 1975 or something. So you really, when you're there, you pick their brain. You start talking about everything you've done, and they were asking me a ton of questions about this as well. And they brought up a couple of good points. There's a couple more O-rings and seals I could replace. They're not leaking currently, but since I've got the engine out, it's probably a great idea to go in and do that. And so one of them is this oil pressure regulator back here, and another one, unfortunately, is on the front of the engine down at the bottom. So I'm going to end up having to take part of the exhaust system back off again and part of the engine mount and get that it's just a little cap you pull off. You just put a new O-ring in there and you put it back on. So it's one of those things, but it would be a bummer to have those things start to leak once we put the engine back in. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. There are quite a little bits and in and outs to it. If you did, please give the episode a thumbs up. Questions or comments, of course, leave them down below and I'll get right to them. And as always, a very special thank you to our Patreon supporters. Okay, well, stay tuned. We got lots more coming up. So until next time, safe travels. Bye.